Hello everybody. Today we will take the pictures from our canvas and build an album. We'll separate this album into different pages, and each time we present the page of one album, we will animate the items on screen using UISnapBehavior. Then, as an additional animation, we will also condition the animation of two buttons, also using UISnapBehavior. We'll start by creating our album view. This will be a UI view controller. Soon you will see why. Our album view controller will have UI views that are passed by the canvas. Again, this is the canvas that we have been developing for the past few exercises. We will select there the views that we want to present, be it an image, a live photo, or a video, and then we will pass on those views to the album view controller so they can be presented in an animated fashion. We're not going to be animating the items with UI view animations. Instead, what we will use is UIDynamicAnimator. The UIDynamicAnimator can animate different behaviors, one of those being the one we are going to use for this exercise, which is going to be UISnapBehavior. In the initializer of the animator, we can pass in a reference view where all of the animations are going to happen. In this case, it's going to be the view of the view controller. Okay, on to the snap behavior. So what we are going to do is snap the items to different places in the view. I'm going to skip over the calculations, but it's basically we want to present this on a grid. And for that, for the snapping, we're going to use UISnapBehavior. So what you do is you create that behavior with an item, which is a UI dynamic item. UIView conforms to this, and we will snap it to a point in the reference view. Then we can control the damping of the behavior, and then we add that behavior to the animator. Again, if you want to see one of the behaviors animate, to start that animation is when you add it to the UI dynamic animator. Now, we're not going to capture yet the images from the canvas view. For now, we're just going to use the sample image that we have in the assets folder, and that's what we will animate several times on screen. Because we have a Swift UI app, we need to create a UI view controller representable for our album view controller. when the media item is type photo, we will use a UI image view. For the other ones, we actually don't have to think very much here because we have been creating UI view representables or UI view controller representables for these classes. Now we can just use AV player view controller and PH live photo view. Now, one catch here is I do need to keep a reference to the AV player view controller, but as you can see here, I cannot store them in the struct because I will be mutating it, which I cannot do it. However, that's what coordinators are for. We will create a class that we can store our AV player view controllers, and that class will be the coordinator that will be part of the context of our UI view representable, UI view controller representable, sorry. Now let's try running. And oh, we got a crash. Oh yes, I'm animating something that's not part of the reference view. We forgot to add this subview. Views were snapping, but I was missing this mistake where I was multiplying. We need to add that part. Let's try again and see the snapping. Now it is animating while we are presenting. So let's add a dispatch queue main async after so we can see the animation after we present. Although we're getting the animation we want, the items are not animating in the correct order. I believe it's because of the formula I'm using for the X and Y position. Yeah, I need to change this. Instead, let's divide it by 2 so that even and odds are displayed in different columns. Let's try now. And there we have it in the order we want. Now you can see there's the snap behavior. The damping is a little bit too much. So let's just remove this. The default damping of UISnapBehavior is 0.5, which is much nicer. Let's also decrease the size of our UI image view. They were a little bit too big. Okay, much better. Now let's connect the images in the views that we're selecting in the canvas and pass them on to the album. Let's select two live photos now. Now let's go to the album. Oh, we have a crash. Okay. Oh, I get it. We're not specifying a size to the PH live photo view. We'll fix that, but for now, let's just select pictures, which are still not being presented. Okay, I've added a few print statements to help us debug. So as we can see, the items are being added to the views that we're passing. Let's present it. The number of views is 0. Okay, that means something is going on here. So it's probably our temp view. We're recreating it. Swift UI views are recreated a bunch of times, so we may be just resetting this array. We can fix this by creating a view model, make it conform to observable object, and in our view, we declare it as a state object. This will make it sure that it will be just created once. Even if the view is re-rendered, this view model won't be reinitialized. We still haven't fixed the PH Live photo view, so we're going to select still images. Now let's go to our album, and there, that fixed it. Now you might have noticed we selected 7 images, yet we are only displaying 6. That's because I haven't specified a scroll view, and also because I don't want to display more than 6 images. I don't want the user to scroll through the pages of the album. We didn't try adding a video to the album, so let's also do that. And let's present the album. Okay, we're getting our snap behavior. However, the AV player view controller has also a big size. We also need to specify the frame for that object. So let's do that. That should fix the issue with both the PH Live Photo View and the AV Player View Controller. Now moving on to the pages. Right now we're just displaying the first 6 images. The other ones are animated off screen, out of bounds. For that, what we're going to do is separate our album into different pages. Each page will have 6 views that will separate in order. Let's move a lot of our logic from our album view controller to our album page view controller. Each of our pages will have a UIDynamicAnimator that will be in charge of animating the views on its view. For now, the only responsibility that our album view controller will have is when it's loaded, it will create the album pages view controller and pass the respective images to each one of the controllers. There's one important difference here. Our album view controller will act as a container of view controllers, just like UI tab bar view or UI navigation view controller. So what we need to do here is after adding the controller view, we need to actually tell the controller that it moved to a parent. So we did it with controller did move to parent, and we're passing the album view controller in the parameter. This will make sure that the UIViewController lifecycle methods that like view did load get called in the correct moment. If not, you can have some weird behavior. What we are doing here is adding all of the album pages view controller to this view controller, but all of them will be displayed off screen. Only the first one will be displayed on the actual screen where the user can see them. All of the other ones will be rendered out of bounds, so the user cannot see them. And what we will do is just animate them on screen. This is also one of the responsibilities of the album view controller, is going to tell the page view controller when it needs to animate its views. And let's remember that the animation of those views is using UISnapBehavior. Okay, let's try running with this. For now, we're just going to present the first page. Select some views here, some pictures. Let's display our album. And okay, we're displaying the first page without any issue. Let's see what happens when we select more than 6 views. Let's select a bunch of these images. And let's load our album. Again, we got the first page. We can not do anything else. And let's debug the view hierarchy to see where are the other pages. So you can see here on the left, that's where our other album pages are being rendered. Okay, for this next step, we will create the controls that we will use to navigate between the pages of the album. So for that, we need to have a variable to keep track of the current index that we're presenting. And we'll create not buttons, but views that will represent the next and the previous action. And they will be in the form of arrows. Okay, now we have the method that adds the arrows to the subview. We will add now a gesture so that we can press an arrow and drag it across the screen. So it's kind of like with a swipe gesture that will be navigating the pages in our album. So we'll have a method to that. We will add a gesture to each arrow. It will be a UIPanGestureRecognizer so that we can tap the arrow, long press it, and just drag it across the screen. I'm not going to go into detail just to avoid making this video longer, but we already did this in another exercise where we use a UIPanGestureRecognizer to move a view across the screen and leave it there. What we do there basically is using the state of the gesture, we get the offset with respect to the center of the view and where the finger is pressing, just so we don't have a weird behavior when dragging. And then for the other states, we use this offset with the center to displace the view as the user is moving the finger across the screen. I will link that video in the description. Let's try seeing our arrows and adding the gesture. For now, we will not have a logic for the pages. Both arrows should appear. Oh, actually, just one arrow appeared. And you may not see it, but I'm trying to drag this arrow and nothing is happening. The dragging part is probably because UIImageView doesn't have the user interaction enable flag on. So let's turn that on. And it turns out that for our next arrow, there's no bounce left arrow. So I just looked up a different SF symbol, and that's what we're going to use. We will also use the didSet method in our current index to hide or show the next and previous arrow UI images view. And once again, let's use UIDynamicAnimator. So one thing here is this is just not to make a fancy animation with images dragging them across the screen. We can use subtle animations or things that the user will understand. For example, here, what we want to do with the image views is we want to drag the image, and if the user did not drag enough part of the screen, let's say the previous one, and they lift the finger, we want the arrow to return to its place. Now, we could do it just by changing the frame, but that will mean that the view will disappear and appear immediately in the other part. Instead, what another option we have is using UISnapBehavior, so that the arrow can have a nice animation that the user can track, and it will have some damping. So that's what we're going to do. Using the views width, we'll determine a minimum amount where the user needs to drag the arrow before executing the next or the previous action. If not, we will use UISnapBehavior to snap the arrow back into position. Sorry about that. We had a few bugs in the implementation, but that's all fixed. Okay, we don't have the action to move the arrow yet, but let's see the snapping of the arrows. So we have our views, we now have our two arrows. Let's drag one of the arrows and see how it's snapping back. Now, notice one thing that's happening here. If I move the arrow more once, it does snap back, but it doesn't have the snap behavior. And that's because each time that we are moving this, we should be adding a new UI snap behavior so that we have that nice animation back with the damping. But for that, we need to change our implementation. This means that we need to use the UI snap behavior to snap the item back. But once the gesture begins to pan, we need to remove this snap behavior so we can add a new one. We shouldn't be adding multiple UI snap behaviors to the same view. For that, we need to keep a reference for the snap behavior. And when the gesture begins, we remove the corresponding snap behavior from that arrow view. Let's try this once again. Move the arrow, snaps back, and there we have that nice damping animation each time the arrow is snapping back. Now for the last part of the exercise, we're just missing switching the pages in the view controller. To animate the other page out, we could also use a UISnapBehavior, but instead of that, we're just going to use a simple UIViewAnimation, switching the frames of the views. I almost missed one thing. We also want to snap the arrow back when we are moving to the next and previous page. Now let's see if our app is complete now. So notice that we only have the next arrow, we have the next page. Move it again. There we have our last page. Let's move it back and we have the album. One future improvement we could do is animating the images back when we go to a page that we have visited before, but that's out of scope for this video. And that was all. As you can see, UIDynamicAnimator is not that new, but it has some very cool animations that we can use, and we can include it in SwiftUI using UIViewControllerRepresentable. In this case, we just use UISnapBehavior, but as you can see, it's very simple to use and it has a very powerful animation. In this case, we used it to add some cool behavior to our controls. See you next time. Bye.